From the 1950s through the early 1970s, the CIA ran one of the most disturbing secret programs in US history. Illegal experiments in mind control, drug testing, and psychological torture. Much of it was immoral. Some of it was deadly. This story isn't just about the past. It's about what happens when unchecked power meets hidden science. And it's a warning of what we still don't know. The roots of MK Ultra lie in the fear-soaked atmosphere of the Cold War. After World War II, the United States was gripped by panic over the growing influence of the Soviet Union. News stories claimed that captured US soldiers were being brainwashed in Korean prison camps. The idea that the enemy could control minds was terrifying, and the CIA was determined not to fall behind. In 1950, the CIA launched Project Bluebird, followed by Project Artichoke. These were early attempts to explore hypnosis, drug-based interrogation, and psychological conditioning. Their mission was to find ways to control human behavior, erase memories, and create programmable individuals who could carry out missions without knowing it. By 1953, under the leadership of CIA Director Allen Dulles, these programs evolved into something even more secretive and ambitious: MK Ultra. With the help of chemist Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA began a quest to unlock the secrets of the human mind using methods that would later shock the world. These weren't just experiments, they were acts of psychological warfare, carried out not on enemies, but on American citizens and allies. What exactly was MK Ultra trying to achieve? The CIA wasn't interested in casual mind games. They wanted full psychological control, to create techniques for interrogation, memory erasure, personality reprogramming, and even the possibility of turning someone into a living weapon, a Manchurian candidate who could carry out orders without conscious awareness. They explored truth serums that could extract confessions. They tested drugs that might break someone's will or make them unable to lie. They studied ways to wipe a person's identity, then build it back up from scratch, possibly with new loyalties or new memories. Why such extreme goals? Because in the CIA's view, the Cold War wasn't just about bombs and borders. It was about influence, loyalty, and control. They feared that the Soviets or Chinese were already ahead in brainwashing. That fear justified anything. But in chasing those possibilities, the agency ignored basic morality and law. They crossed lines no democratic government should ever cross, and they did it in total secrecy, often without the knowledge or consent of the people they experimented on. The question wasn't just, can we control the mind? It was, what are we willing to do to find out? LSD was MK Ultra's signature weapon. The CIA believed this new psychedelic drug could open or break the human mind. They didn't just test it once or twice. In one horrifying case at a federal prison hospital in Lexington, Kentucky, 7 inmates, mostly black men, were given massive LSD doses daily for 77 straight days. They were locked in padded cells, monitored around the clock, and offered heroin in exchange for compliance. In other cases, people were dosed unknowingly at bars, in brothels, or even CIA offices. Some agents spiked their co-workers' drinks just to observe the chaos. Victims suffered hallucinations, breakdowns, and long-term psychological damage, and many never knew why. In Canada, Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, one of MK Ultra's most active collaborators, carried out experiments that sound like science fiction. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, patients came seeking help for anxiety or depression. What they got instead was deep patterning. Cameron used electroconvulsive therapy at up to 40 times the normal voltage to wipe patients' memories clean. Then he pumped them full of sedatives, paralytics, and hallucinogens, often leaving them in drugged sleep for weeks at a time. The final step was psychic driving. Subjects were forced to listen to audio loops of repeated phrases hundreds of thousands of times while sedated or paralyzed. The goal was to erase the old personality and program a new one. MK Ultra researchers were obsessed with breaking the human mind, and one of the most effective tools was sensory deprivation. Subjects were placed in dark, soundless rooms. Some wore blindfolds and earmuffs. Others floated in tanks or were strapped to beds for days at a time. With no light, sound, or human contact, people quickly began to hallucinate, panic, or break down emotionally. This was sometimes paired with drugs, shock therapy, or hypnosis. The point wasn't just to cause discomfort, it was to erase a person's identity and make them more suggestible. Perhaps the strangest MK Ultra experiment was Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York, disguised as brothels. They hired prostitutes to lure men inside, where they were secretly dosed with LSD and watched through one-way mirrors. Agents observed from behind glass, taking notes on how the men reacted. Sometimes the women were instructed to ask specific questions or manipulate the subjects in different ways. The rooms were wired for sound and video. This was more than voyeurism. It was a dark study in sexual power, drugs, and control. And it was completely illegal. The subjects never gave consent, and most had no idea they'd been used in a CIA experiment. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of MKUltra is that children were involved and possibly targeted. Declassified documents mention Subproject 103 and Subproject 112, both labeled as involving experiments on children. Some researchers partnered with institutions that housed mentally disabled children, and there are claims that these minors were subjected to LSD testing, electroshock, and hypnosis. In 1995, survivors gave testimony describing horrific childhood abuse under what they believed were CIA experiments. One woman said she was just 7 years old when she was strapped down, drugged, and tortured, while hypnotic commands were repeated in her ears. Others spoke of being raped, filmed, or forced to participate in bizarre rituals. Some alleged they were trained as child operatives, used in missions they couldn't remember afterward. Although some of these claims remain unverified, and skeptics point to a lack of hard evidence, the CIA's destruction of MKUltra files makes it nearly impossible to know the full truth. But one thing is clear: the inclusion of children in any of these experiments, even once, turns a dark chapter into something far worse. The most infamous MKUltra death was Frank Olson, a US Army scientist. He was secretly dosed with LSD by his colleagues. 9 days later, he fell from a 13th-story New York hotel window. The CIA called it a suicide, but decades later, Olson's family won a settlement and claimed he was murdered. But Olson wasn't the only victim. Some subjects developed schizophrenia. Others suffered permanent memory loss or emotional trauma. Families were torn apart, and trust in medicine was shattered. Most never knew they were part of an experiment. Even today, some survivors still don't know why they suffered, because the records are gone, burned in a government incinerator. By the early 1970s, MKUltra had become a liability. As public trust in government collapsed during the Watergate era, CIA leadership feared exposure. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MKUltra files destroyed in a direct effort to erase the program from history. Most documents were incinerated, only a handful survived, hidden in a budget office under a misfiled label. These 20,000 pages offered a glimpse, but not the full story. In 1975, the Church Committee in the US Senate began investigating illegal CIA activity, including MKUltra. What they uncovered was disturbing enough to shock the nation, but with most records gone, the committee was working with fragments. Even today, the full scale of MKUltra remains unknown. We only know what the CIA failed to destroy and what a few brave whistleblowers managed to tell us. After MKUltra was exposed, the US government faced a wave of outrage, but accountability was limited. Some families, like that of Frank Olson, received settlements. A few public apologies were made, but no one was ever criminally charged, and most victims never got justice. Lawsuits were filed against the CIA, but they often failed. Courts ruled that national security concerns or lack of evidence prevented further action. For many survivors, the scars remained, with no acknowledgement or compensation. Ethically, MKUltra shattered every principle of medical and psychological research. There was no informed consent, no oversight, no protection for vulnerable people, including prisoners, the mentally ill, and children. The experiments violated basic human rights and international laws, but because they were done in secret, MKUltra was more than a secret experiment. It was a betrayal. A government turned its own citizens, allies, and even children into test subjects in a quest to control the human mind. We may never know the full extent of what happened. Too many records were destroyed. Too many people were silenced. But what we do know is enough to shock the conscience. MKUltra stands as a warning. In the wrong hands, science and secrecy can become weapons. The line between defense and abuse can vanish unless we demand transparency, accountability, and humanity from those in power. This has been Sealed Secrets. Subscribe for more forbidden histories and chilling mysteries.